I thought it was important to do a video and explain the myths versus the facts of human trafficking. I do feel like there's a lot of misinformation floating around about what trafficking actually is and who's affected and what it means for a person to be trafficked. So I thought I would make a video on myths versus facts and just throw some of the myths and facts out there for you. There is a myth that traffickers target victims they don't know. And that is probably one of the big myths that there is. The fact is, a majority of the time, victims are trafficked by someone they do know, such as friend, family member, or romantic partner. A lot of the time, they will meet you online. You may not know who this person is in real life. You may fall in love with them online. They may offer a better life, a better everything. There could also be someone offering a better job. A better online is a huge, huge part of this because that's how they start to groom you for trafficking, is by offering you things that you don't feel that you have right now that they can offer you. So just be aware of who you're talking to, especially who your children are talking to online. Ask those tough questions. Be nosy, constantly check on them, see who they're talking to and why they're talking to them. It's very important that you know who their friends are. And if they don't know who this person is online that they're talking to, they should not be talking to that person. They should know someone in real life that knows them or they know them. That's the main thing. Another myth is that only girls and women are victims of human trafficking. And the fact is, boys and men are just as likely to be victims of human trafficking as girls and women. However, they are less likely to be identified and reported. Boys, men just do not report this crime. Girls and boys are often subject to different types of trafficking, though. For instance, girls may be trafficked for forced marriage and sexual exploitation, while boys may be trafficked for forced labor or recruitment into armed groups. Another myth is that all human trafficking involves sex or prostitution. The fact is, human trafficking can include forced labor, domestic servitude, organ trafficking, debt bondage, recruitment of children as child soldiers, and sex trafficking and forced prostitution. So sexual prostitution, sex trafficking, that is not the only type of trafficking. The other types of trafficking are very real, and they happen all over this country as well. Another myth is that trafficking involves traveling or transporting and moving a person across borders. And the fact is, human trafficking is not the same thing as smuggling, which are two terms that are commonly confused. Trafficking does not require movement across borders. In fact, in some cases, a child could be trafficked and exploited from their own home. In the U.S., trafficking most frequently occurs at hotels, motels, truck stops, and online. And there's that very important online measure again. More recently, it's gotten a lot more popular to groom people online and, again, offer those things that you feel like you might not have in your life that you'd like to have. Especially children are very vulnerable. They could offer to give them a better life, let them live a free life. They want, a teenager wants to have freedom and offer them money and all different types of things to meet with them in real life, which is where the rest of the grooming process takes place. Another myth is people being trafficked are physically unable to leave or they're held against their will. And the fact is, trafficking can involve force, but people can also be trafficked through threats or coercion or even deception. People in trafficking situations can be controlled through drug addiction, violent relationships, manipulation, lack of financial independence, or isolation from family or friends, in addition to physical restraint or harm. So that person that's being trafficked may actually be living at home. It may be a teenager. They may be going to school. They may be living at home, but they may be trafficked. And it's important to kind of keep your eye out for little telltale signs of a teenager not acting the same, acting like something's bothering them. Try to get to the bottom of what is really upsetting them. Is it everyday school, everyday life, that type of thing? Or is there something deeper that's wrong? So it's important to ask those questions. And then another myth is that trafficking primarily occurs in developing countries. And the fact is that trafficking occurs all over the world, though the most common forms of trafficking can differ by country. The United States, for example, is one of the most active sex trafficking countries in the world, where exploitation of trafficking victims occurs in cities, suburban, and rural areas. Labor trafficking occurs in the U.S., but at lower rates than most developing countries. And I've had people ask me, who is at most risk for sexual exploitation, sex trafficking? And U.S. children in the foster care system are highly likely to be preyed on and become victims of child sex trafficking. Homelessness, poverty, domestic violence, substance abuse, mental or physical disability, or lack of legal immigration status, they are all common reasons that individuals become vulnerable to human sex trafficking. And no one is exempt from deception and manipulation tactics used by traffickers, but preteen girls are most susceptible. Runaways are also targets for recruiters. A young person is likely to be sold for commercial sexual exploitation after running away from home. In 2016, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children estimated that 1 in 6 endangered runaways reported to them that they were likely sex trafficking victims. Runaways are picked up by traffickers who promise them shelter, food, clothing, and employment. Now let's talk a bit about recruiting methods of traffickers. Lies, feigned affection, deception, threats, and violence are all tactics used by human sex traffickers when recruiting new victims for sexual exploitation. Recruiters pose as friendly people as they attempt to befriend vulnerable-looking girls and boys at malls, arcades, parks, movie theaters, and even schools. Many times recruiters will form a strong bond with young girls, promising a lifestyle they have never experienced. And they'll claim to love the victim and to manipulate them into thinking sex acts are for their future together. Some sex trafficking victims have not had a positive male role model in their life, and the traffickers use this to their advantage. They force the victims to refer to them as daddy and further manipulate their mental state. Other tactics used by human sex traffickers are violence and gang rape to force victims to do what is asked of them. Additionally, they may drug their victims in order to continue having control. Now let's focus on the warning signs of human trafficking. Human sex traffickers are able to keep their victims in the web of exploitation simply because sex trafficking can be hard to pinpoint. It's important to understand the growing tragedy of sex trafficking and to have an idea on how to spot potential red flags and indicators to be able to help victims who are caught up in this crime and find the assistance that they need. The warning signs that someone's a victim of human sex trafficking can include, but are not limited to, signs of physical abuse including burns, bruises, or cuts, less appropriately dressed than before, sexualized behavior, overly tired, lacks health care, withdrawn, depressed, or they checked out, brags about making lots of money. They have a new tattoo. Pimps use tattoos as a way to brand their victims. Older friends with different lifestyles. They appear malnourished. They have few or no personal possessions. Is not in control of their money. Loss of sense of time. Inability to clarify where he or she is staying. Avoids eye contact. They're fearful, anxious, tense, or nervous. They don't have any type of identification. Traffickers will often take the victim's birth certificates, passports, and driver's licenses. Often it's hard to realize whether somebody is a victim or not because not all victims believe they are a victim. There are instances where victims don't want help. You may have recognized a few human sex trafficking warning signs, but the victim is not aware or understands that he or she is being exploited. Many times they are involved in an unhealthy relationship with their traffickers, involving deep levels of psychological conditioning based on either fear or misplaced feelings of love. In other cases, the victims feel they are in debt to their traffickers because they have provided them with shelter and food. Feeling ashamed and helpless may also be reasons why a victim turns away help. They don't want to talk about what they have been through or are going through. They may also fear what will happen to their families if they discuss truth due to previous threats from their traffickers. There are other factors that cause victims to be reluctant to report or seek help because they don't know who to trust due to their unfamiliar surroundings, or they don't know help is available, how to access it, or where to go for it, or they are unfamiliar with the cultures and language of the country they're being held in. They may also fear law enforcement, or they're addicted to drugs and alcohol. If you are a victim of trafficking or have suspicions of trafficking occurring in your community, please contact the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888. Again, that's 1-888-373-7888. They are trained professionals who respond to victims with assistance including shelter, security, food, medical treatment, clothing, and other assistance. If you like our content, please remember to hit the like, subscribe, and the bell so that you can get notifications when we have new videos. We include videos on human trafficking, missing persons, true crime, and psychology. And also feel free to visit our website and our blog at www.truecrimewiththelmaandlouise.com.